IVM.
One of the areas we haven't focused on enough on Advertising is Dead have been what are traditionally called B2B companies. This space that was always looked at as a separated industry from more consumer-facing businesses has evolved a lot closer in approach to consumer brands because of the advent of digital and the larger digital ecosystem. It's also made them look at all aspects of marketing and content from a lens very similar to where the wider B2C market is headed, as well as retaining and enhancing some of the tech-enabled customer experience practices that have helped them drive a truly global model of growth with focused localization to enhance the way they function. And to discuss all of this and so much more, I have Praval Singh, the VP Marketing and Customer Experience of Zoho on the show today. I'm Varun, and we'll be right back with Advertising is Dead.
पेश खिदमत है आपकी शान में हमारे अंजुमन से. Hi, I am Sadaf.
And I'm Arshit. खाने का इतिहास, economics, policy, psychology, सब है मेन्यू पे.
Only on the Nankali podcast every Wednesday, सिर्फ IVM podcast app या वेबसाइट पर या फिर जहां से भी आप अपने पॉडकास्ट सुनते हो.
Welcome back to Advertising is Dead with Praval. Hi Praval.
Hey Varun, good to see you.
Good to have you on the show. And when we had our pre-discussion before we scheduled this recording, and I was there were a bunch of thoughts in my head, but you gave me a lot more fodder for thought. But I thought we'll start off with some of the I would say some of the basics of it, right? How do you look at the space in which you operate to be different in terms of a B2B space from a marketing point of view, different from how, let's say, more consumer side of things going? So how do you view the difference of that?
So this classic B2B versus B2C question keeps coming on and off on different platforms and conversations with people like you and even otherwise internally as well. Yeah. There have been times when we were trying to work on a campaign or an initiative, and somebody would invariably say that this might have worked better for a B2C, which is true. Not everything that works for a B2C would essentially work for a B2B idea. But come to think of it, today, the way we do business, right, you and I and people we deal with, is very different from, how it was done just 10 years ago, right? True. I like to point smartphones or the iPhone in the history of, our evolution as a very significant time, and it changed a lot of things. And then the App Store and everything else that followed. Our lives are so different today than it was just 10 years ago. And I think we're so privileged to be part of this generation. Maybe the next generation would not even understand it from this perspective. But today we are also connected. We're in a world where I'm more concerned about my internet working at all time than my TV working today, right?
True.
So in these times, because we as human beings are dealing with other human beings, end of the day, they're all connected. My customers often engage directly with me, on social networks, even though in a traditional setup, they would write to a customer support email address or pick up the phone and call. These lines are so blurred today that ultimately, as a company, whether you're a B2B or a B2C company, you're dealing with people, right? And from a marketing standpoint, your message, your appeal, or whatever you're trying to sell, right? Yeah. Or trying to be useful, I would say, has to be targeted towards an individual or a group of individuals, right? Or a sect of people, depending on what your product or offering is. I think these lines are blurred at a very broad level, I would say. But if you dive deeper into it, the mechanics of it, right? Or the vehicles of distribution, all that definitely varies. The channels that one would use. Think about something like push notifications for that matter, or we've seen very different use cases in a B2B scenario versus a B2C scenario, right? Or if you're running an e-commerce business, looking at selling it to consumers, or a D2C brands if you're a D2C brand, a lot of them coming up now, especially in India, you're again talking to human beings, but the channel that you choose, the method that you use, they all differ. So I think at a broad level, they're all same, in terms of the intent is the same, I would say. But yes, how you operate, how you go about picking that channel and execute that varies. But I think these lines have in the last 10 years. So, the way smartphones came, the internet, how today we are hyper connected, right? All that has changed things a lot. So my perspective is, if an idea comes, rather than putting a B2B versus a B2C lens up front, we try to evaluate the idea purely on its merit. That's what I would say.
Yeah, what you said is interesting, right? Also, because so a lot of times you'd have a lot of listeners kind of write in and say, you primarily focused on B2C brands or everything from that space. And my response has always been, I have a feeling those lines have been blurred. I'm glad you kind of said pretty much what I've been kind of assuming in my mind is how things would work. I'd like to kind of take a couple of steps back and say that, you've been with Zoho now for a period of time. I think what I'd love to kind of hear is how you've approached things and how have changes happened in both in terms of how you looked at marketing, how you guys kind of used to do things, let's say 8 years ago versus now. How has that transition kind of happened, right? Have there been specific changes that you've done across the way? Both as a company, but also from the marketing end.
Sure. So this is my 9th year at Zoho. Just to give you a perspective, I joined the company in 2012, and we were about 1,500 people back then, and around 15 products in the B2B SaaS space, and I think 5 million users. Right today, we've come to about 9,000 colleagues that I have today, 50 plus products, and 60 million users, right? So it's been a long journey. But one thing there are things that have been changed over the course of last 8-9 years that I've seen, and there are things that haven't changed, right? So I would touch upon both very briefly. So things that haven't changed is, unlike a lot of other companies in the space that we compete with or we work together with, our investment into sales and marketing has always been a small percentage of our revenues, right? And that's by choice, that's by intent, not accidental. Because as a company, we've always been R&D focused, right? A bulk of our investments go into R&D, and the intent has been to own the entire stack of all the way from data centers to the application. And in all these years, what changed in this context is we strengthened our positioning as a company in owning this stack. And what it meant, or what it today means for the customer is, we value their privacy, right? And we are able to, talk about privacy without even, a mandate of a GDPR or anything of that kind. It's more because as a company, we believe your data is private to you, and that's how it should be. So things like not showing ads in any of our products, including the free edition, right? Or not selling user data in any other form to sort of make money. The revenue model has never been ad-led. Okay, that's a mindset that has not changed. If anything, it has only gotten stronger with our capabilities that we have built over the years. Now, when you talk about it from a consumer lens or a customer angle, it sounds very good that, this is a company that cares about my privacy. There's a company that keeps my data private and guarantees that. But from a marketing, if I wear my marketing hat, right, it in a way works against me, is what a lot of people might think, that, hey, if I cannot use third-party tools to track user behavior on my website, how do I optimize? How do I increase my conversion rate? How do I do, so from a marketing lens, that might sound counterproductive. But what we think about it, and we've come to believe that, yes, in the short run, not being able to track every single touch point, okay, using a third-party tool might be a concern. But in the long term, we'll be able to establish ourselves as a company that truly values your privacy as a customer, and where privacy is becoming more and more relevant over the years. I think that works in our favor and not against us, because and we feel that in the coming years, more and more people will value their privacy, their data, their consent than they did 10 years ago. So this is something that we've built over the years, and that has not changed amongst many things. What has changed apart from this is, our approach towards marketing. As a company, we compete in a market with 50 different companies because the sheer breadth of products that we offer. But what is interesting here is something that ties us together in our message, in our proposition, is it's not just a group of products that you can buy individually or together. It's the contextual information that we are able to provide to a customer, right? Which is just not possible if you're looking at tools from different vendors. I mean, you can duct tape them, use some integration to put them together. But the kind of, what we call the unified system that we can create, just because all that data is sitting on a common layer, we're able to use that data to give you contextual information that you as a customer would value a lot more. So all this is only exactly right. I mean, think about it. Most companies today use a social media management tool to manage their social media, and most of them use a CRM to manage customer data, right? Now, talk about two independent tools in the market, a CRM and a social media tool that talk to each other the way our tools can talk to each other, right? Because they're built on the same stack, right? Yeah. So if I am listening to, let's say I get a tweet from someone, or a customer, or a prospect who's angry on us, for me to look into the history of that person's records would be very easy. That, okay, this person signed up for 2 of these products, and here are the support tickets that I received from this person, so on and so forth, right? So there's a lot of context baked into the ecosystem, which I think is great value for our customers. And from a marketing standpoint, what we've been trying to do over these years is to relay that message, to talk about how it's not just a group of products, it's beyond that. And yes, things like these take time. It took us 2 decades to build where we are, today. And I think that's sort of working in our favor. So yeah, short term, there is a loss when you go on the other end of the spectrum saying that we are privacy first. But long term, there are benefits of it. You're able to build trust and loyalty, and these things take time to build. So that's how we look at it.
What I also found interesting about the entire product piece was the localization aspect of it, right? Is that you kind of looked at it from that angle, and I'd love for you kind of talk a little bit more about that aspect as well.
So there are 2 things to it. One is localizing our messaging, our content, right? Which is what our marketing teams across regions look at. In the last several years, we always serve customers in across several countries, but in the recent years, we've opened offices, hired local teams in many of these offices. And the focus is to, create that local experience, even though we are a global company, right? We call it Transnational Localism, which is essentially that we operate across the world, but in every country or region we operate in, we want to be local there. And how is it possible? We have a very clear philosophy on that. The thing is, when you're trying to open offices locally in these many areas and regions, there's always a chance that the cultures would be very different in these offices, right?
True.
There will always be a microculture within an office that would be different from other offices. That definitely will exist. You can't avoid that, and you should not. But there's a macro culture that sits at the company level across the board, right? How do you retain that? So what we've done so far is someone from the leadership would actually move to that region, depending on who wants to and who's the right fit. And then we hire locally. We hire a lot of people locally, look for similar traits in people that would fit into the larger culture that I'm talking about. Yeah. And then hire locally to bring in that local microculture elements into it, right? Yeah. And that's how we have expanded. So from an expansion perspective, transnational localism is what we're looking at. And it's actually going a step further now. So not just local, but also there's a strong sense of belief that we want to be rural as well. right? And when I say rural, I just don't mean in India. We're doing things in India that we've spoken about here and there, but also we are taking a step forward into going rural in other countries as well. For example, in the US, we started a new operation in a small area which is slightly off Austin, Texas, which is our US headquarters. So we're trying to go rural, we're trying to go transnational, and stay local as well. So that's one thing. The other thing is our products have always, we've strived towards making our products local in a sense with localization, beat, not just translation, but true localization as well. And same for marketing. So think about it. If a customer from a country comes on our website or any collateral, they would rather like to see something that they can relate with, local case studies, local customer stories, certain products that are customized in a certain way for that region. So all that is part of our larger outlook that you have to localize to be able to serve the entire world, right? And that's something that we've been doing for so many years. But now with this entire transnational localism mindset, we want to go deeper into each of these regions that we operate in.
You make an interesting point, right? Because when you mention the part about someone moving to that country, so you bringing that in there, but also adding a local talent, and I'm gathering there is a balance to that. Right? It can go one way or the other very easily, where you might bring in way too much enforcement from a global perspective, which kind of tends to lose the localism. But also, if you add too many local, you might lose that. And now you've added that other layer of saying we're not just going to be urban focused, we're going to go wider than that. Are there ways in which you kind of work to keep that balance in place? Because obviously these are, end of the day, it's humans, but I'm guessing there are there specific ways of working to kind of push through to make these things work?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. When I think of it, one thing that ties us together, we're talking about 9,000 people today, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Even though most of them are in India, there are so many colleagues of ours whom we work with every day. They're from different regions, right? And speak different languages, celebrate different kind of festivals and all of that. And except for this year, for obvious reasons, we would otherwise catch up here and there at our events. There would be visits and trips and all of that. One thing that I've seen that ties us together is the fabric, which is common across the board. Like I said, you call it culture, you call it certain traits that people have here. And I think when I spoke about someone from the leadership who spent enough time at Zoho, has understood, and is part of the DNA, when that person moves and he or she is looking to build a team there, they know what to look for, because they have by then, inculcated that DNA within themselves. So it's like expanding, your DNA in other regions without having a lot of people from India or from other offices go there. So because that person has spent enough time in the company, understands what works, what doesn't work, knows what kind of people to look for, and there is a sense of similarity. While human beings are very different, but there's a sense of similarity, that common thread, that fabric that ties us together. So it's challenging, like you said. It's very hard to, let's say, for someone who spent 5, 10, 15 years at Zoho to have to go and build an office in a new country, build a team in a new country. It's very, very challenging, right? And we started doing it a few years ago, and so far I think we've come a long way, and it's been an interesting experience for the teams that have done it. But yeah, it's challenging, but it's fun as well, and we're doing it more so now than we did historically.
You've been working remotely for a much longer period of time than all of us have discovered this come March. You've been doing this for a much longer period of time.
So is that a 5-mark question or a 20-mark question? It depends how long you want me to answer that.
You can go for how many marks you want to go for.
Okay, so prior to joining Zoho, I used to run a small agency with 2 great friends of mine. I met on Twitter, and it was in Delhi. And when I joined Zoho, the idea was to sort of continue to work from where I am because of family and other reasons. I want to be here. And I had never worked remotely before. And this is 2012, right? And so it started off as an experiment. I would travel to our mothership in India, Chennai, and once every quarter at least, and a few times to our other offices. But over these years, I think a lot of people, especially this year, have asked me that, oh, this is normal for you, right? This is how you've always worked. I would tend to disagree because working from home is very different from working through a pandemic, right? I mean, I would still have
Thanks
the choice.
for clarifying that. I've said that to so many people.
I would say that while it was working remotely, I used to work remotely, I would hardly be home. I would either be in one of our offices, oftentimes at an airport, or I would visit my parents to see them in between and continue to work where I am, right? With my a phone and a laptop or whatever it takes. This year, I've been cooped up in this apartment for like all these months, right? Haven't really seen my colleagues, my parents, my friends, right? So this is very, very different mentally for me. But on the other side, yes, I would say I'm privileged to have a space at home to be able to work with near zero distractions and all of that. And also didn't have to rush for buying a desk and a chair and a screen and worry about ergonomics and whatnot, because the essentials were in place even before this happened. But I would say it feels good to be home. Because there's a lot of travel prior to this year. I would say I would travel a lot. So I would miss sometimes being at home and doing things at home, like taking care of my plants or whatever, other hobbies. So that way it was different. But so it's a mixed feeling, I would say. There are things that have not changed, but there are things that have changed a lot for all of us. And I think personally, I'm very grateful for what me and as a family we have access to, and we're still able to work, which keeps us busy and happy and all of that. So it's a mixed feeling.
I remember you telling me when we were catching up before this recording about how as well there's been this entire move to even working remotely out of villages, out of the rural spaces as well, which I found really interesting as movement, because I thought it's a great way to bring balance to how I call them divisions within the world, or rather, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about that from you.
Yeah, I mean, so there's some background to it, and then there's of course a lot of development that happened this year. So just to give you some context, our first remote or rural office was set up 10 years ago. Most people don't know that, right? It's in a beautiful town called Tenkasi down south. And that office today has about 450 people. Wow. And we've shipped one of our products from there, which is one of the fastest growing products at Zoho of a decent size. Now, all of that has been happening for 10 years. So there was already an intent to move away from larger cities. I mean, even if you look at our office in Chennai, it's not in Chennai, it's in the district Kanchipuram, which is the next district, right? It's easily an hour away from Chennai, I would say that. Similarly, in the US, now that our US headquarters are in Austin, okay, we moved to Austin a few years ago, right? When it wasn't even cool to move to Austin. Now you see within a month, several companies have moved to Austin from Silicon Valley, right? Even our office in California was not in Silicon Valley. We were in a small, sleepy town called Pleasanton, which is like 50 miles from downtown San Francisco. So there's always this mindset of being away from the city centers for a few reasons. One is we liked space. We've always liked space, for our employees, for us. And we just feel that when you have a lot of open spaces, it's just better for you. And it's very hard to do that when your office is in a city center. Second is the cities are overloaded, be it India, be it US, be it anywhere, right? I mean, because the migration has always happened that way, in that direction, right? So lack of resources, overload in terms of pollution, traffic, all of that. So we always had this mindset of staying away. But in the last 10 years, our Tenkasi office came up. Then a couple of years ago, we opened an office in Renigunta, right? But what happened this year is all these efforts actually suddenly got a supercharge. So Sridhar, our CEO, he moved to another small village close to Tenkasi towards the end of 2019, I think October 2019. This was pre-pandemic. Okay, he moved back from California in the US to India, and he set himself up in a village near our Tenkasi office. Now, again, his intentions were the same that has been there for the company for so many years, is to stay away from the hustle of cities and have access to open areas, connect with local people, all of that. And if you look at it, why is that possible? Okay, is because a few reasons. So one is the nature of the cloud technology itself, the area that we play in, right? I mean, if you ask me that if we were in a business of manufacturing cars, right, could have we done this at such pace? Maybe not, right?
A lot more moving parts over there.
Yeah, exactly. There's this lot else to worry about in those kind of businesses. But thankfully for the cloud technology, the area that we work in, that's how it is. Today, you can be sitting in a remote village in India, right, connected to fiber, which is surprising, by the way, right? And like I could be sitting anywhere in this country today where there is internet and be doing this call with you, right? You wouldn't really care about where I am. So cloud technology enables that, right? Second is our own products and tools that we build, we consume, and we sell, right? So this also enables communication, collaboration, all of that, creation. That is one. Second is our mindset that the economics work so much better when you are not paying a huge rent in a city center.
100%.
Right? The cost of living goes down. Colleagues can have better quality of life. In the sense, like think about owning an apartment or building a house in a city like Mumbai or Delhi. How many years of work does it need? I mean, how many years of experience do you need to build a house? Work experience, even though they're not related, right? So as a company, we've had that mindset that the people who would want to go back to their roots, their towns and villages, and may not like the hustle and bustle of a large city, of course. And of course, when you're talking about 9,000 people, it takes one of each kind to make 9,000 people. So I'm not saying everybody thinks of it that way, but a lot of people do think of going back to their villages and towns. And I think that is another thing that sped up our operations towards moving to rural areas this year. Interestingly, after the lockdown, a couple of months into the lockdown, we did a survey asking our colleagues how many of them would want to come back to the office, the one that they used to work. And it was in Chennai. 40% of them said that they would rather be where they are. And majority of them were in a small town or village, because this pandemic has, in a way taught us that, we want to be close to our family and loved ones, right? So a lot of people just want to be there. And this seeded an idea of starting more distributed rural offices, right? Smaller offices, because see, here's the thing. As a company, while we're going distributed or remote, we are not big fans of working in silos. As a company, we feel that once in a while you need to see your colleagues, have lunch with them together, bounce off ideas together, and that's how it's been. Even here in Delhi, like a couple of years after I joined, we opened up an office here. We have 5 or 6 people working from here. We would catch up twice or thrice a week to, even for some time, just to talk about work and life, and so that as human beings we need that, right? We value that. So our offices that we're opening up, largely in rural areas, are about 20 people each. We've opened over 10 offices already in this pandemic. So think about it. When you look back, what we started as a thought 10 years ago, has evolved so much in these last 10 months ago, because it's not just about the CEO moving to a village. It's about a lot of other people wanting to live that kind of a life. Okay? And the economics make sense. Cloud technology enables you to do that. And there's a larger purpose as well. So if you look at it historically, what has happened is, a lot of people in these villages, including our CEO himself, right? I mean, he's from a village, left the village to go to city to study, and then left that city to go to the US to study more and then work and whatnot. we call it topsoil erosion in a way.
Yeah.
Right. People are leaving their roots to go elsewhere. Right. We're trying to reverse that to an extent. Right. And what happens is when someone like you and me who spent years in a city and have exposure to a lot other things, when we go back to our villages, right? I would go back to my village once every quarter. I like to do that. The kind of ideas that we exchange, there is a sense of osmosis that happens, right? You talk to the rural kids, people, their challenges are very different than ours. Their priorities are very different than ours. So this cross-fertilization of ideas, I think it's a very good thing and it's a very good feeling. So all this together is what sort of drives us to think about what we call rural revival. And it comes straight up from Sridhar, the CEO himself.
And what he says is, on multiple levels, I feel that this pandemic also made us value things which we didn't really value enough. It's just like open space, right? I remember the first time we went to an open space. So midway through the pandemic, tried to figure out a farmhouse you can just go to with the dogs, you can run around and stuff, and just came back in half a day. The value of that, something you kind of learned because of this. And I think there's so many of those aspects. And the common thread I've always heard anybody I've spoken to who has like tried to move to, let's say, the easiest one for people in Bombay, most people have tried to move to Goa to work out of, right? And that's been obvious, like default setting, or go to Pune. But I think for Goa, everyone's question always is, how do you get, everyone says, will I get internet over there? Is pretty much what, but I think that's the beauty of it, right? You would have to ask for so many more things in a pre-digitally driven world. Now all you need is a space where you have internet, and I feel that the beauty of that is sometimes if you look at it, it's you simplified all you need to be able to operate.
Yeah, I mean, that's how the law of hierarchy has today, condensed into that. And I feel fortunate that I work in a space, an industry which has to do with internet, cloud, technology, all of that, what we're talking about, right? And how beautifully it connects with remote work or distributed work, right? So it's interesting. And while the pandemic has taught all of us a lot, I think it's also opened up new opportunities and newer ways of thinking, right? I mean, we see it internally with our colleagues, with our partners, with our customers, that of course, businesses have suffered, but this has also led to a lot of businesses innovate, think differently, hire differently, all of that.
Speaking of careers and everything else, right? If I was someone who was just starting off their career, and I'm not particularly sick, I want to look for a job in the B2B space, but I'm just generally want to understand what it will take from me in terms of skill sets to really be able to be effective as a marketer. And I'll go broader on this one, not just B2B, but across the board, right? What are currently the skill sets that someone needs to kind of make sure they can hone in? Could be the start of their career, could be midway through trying to make a change, but okay, and what do I need to upskill myself on? What are the things that you look out for when you hire people into your team?
Sure. So if you talk about the industry broadly, the first differentiation that comes when people look for hiring good talent oftentimes used to be the pedigree, the academic background and all that. At Zoho, that's not what we look for. I mean, we don't even look for a resume that you would come up with. So that's not something. And I personally, in my experience of working for 13 plus years, I think a resume tells so little about someone that, it's unfair. It's almost unfair on both parties to decide on a agreement or relationship based on a one-page or two-page document. But speaking of skill sets, now it depends. How I look at it is, let's say we're looking to hire someone with 0 to 5 years of experience. For someone who's fresh out of college or even fresh out of school and hasn't never been to college. By the way, that's one group of people we bring on board, where we get kids after 10 plus 2 and plus 3 to come join what we call Zoho Schools of Learning, and we train them and we incubate them and we bring them on board. That has nothing to do with any academic credentials or anything of that kind. But what we look for is having that attitude to sort of learn and figure things out along the way, fitting into the culture of what the company stands for, everything from building our own stack, focusing on privacy, thinking long-term, having that R&D mindset, not a get rich quick scheme. Now, nothing wrong with the other mindset as well. What I'm saying is this is how we operate, and it's always good to add people on your team who have similar mindsets, right? But more on the talent, I think from a marketing standpoint, when I look for bringing someone on the team, I think today, because of, again, the access to the internet technology tools, which each one of us have, if I'm bringing someone for, let's say, content role on board, right? I don't need to see their CV. I would rather see their work that they have created, right? It may or may not be for a client or a company. Or interestingly, just last week, I was speaking with somebody who has a very interesting blog that she runs, has worked for one of the popular B2C brands in the past as an intern, and wants to create more stories, wants to create stories in the, again, B2B space. And that's not something she's ever done. But coming back to the first question, would you hire someone who has zero B2B experience? Well, for someone like her, I would, because I could just tell, looking at her work, that she can create content, she can create stories that resonate with people and people can connect with, even if she has zero B2B experience, right? So this B2B versus B2C, that mindset, I think, like I said, is blurred when you're talking about communication in general. And people who've created work in their personal capacity, even if they've not really done work that they can share with their current employer or otherwise, I mean, and it is happening not just in marketing. I mean, I run across, on the internet, a lot of these 22, 25-year-olds who have an amazing Behance profile or their GitHub repository is like, I just feel that they're so ahead. What was I doing 10, 15 years ago? None of that, all right? None of that. So it's an interesting world that we live in, and this hyper-connected, world that we are in. I think the people in their 20s today have a lot more access, and most of them I've seen make good use of it. So that makes them. I mean, sometimes I feel that I have one role that's open. I'm talking to 5 people, and each one of them are like good, equally good, or that how do I say no to these 4 because they're so good, right? So at the same time, in another situation, you might be looking for someone in a particular region, in a particular bracket, and you would be so hard pressed to, fill that role, but you would not find a single person, right? So it's so diverse, that there is, I think, as someone said, that, talent is distributed, opportunities are not, right? That's what I think with the new way of working, where we're talking about distributed environment and all of that. Those boundaries are getting blurred, and it's making it easier for talent to find opportunities, right? So that's how I like to look at it. That's how I look at hiring people or working with them, right? I mean, everybody has access to the same tools, right? Everybody has access to YouTube or Twitter or Instagram or, all of this. What we do with that is what differentiates us, I think. And that's what I look for in talent, not the resumes or which college did they go to and none of that.
Yeah. What I also find interesting, what you just said, is that the word content showed up many times, and I feel that content's become so core for any product to kind of push themselves out there. And how do you look at content as a part of the overall mix of how it's seeped into how you connect with your consumers, how you push for enabling sales, etc. So how has that kind of scaled up? I mean, I'm sure it's always been a part of it, but how have you seen that scale up as a part of that?
Think about it. Content has always been around, right? I mean, we've consumed content in various phases and formats and channels, all of that. How we choose to consume content today, that has changed, right? I mean, the other day I remember I turned on the TV after I don't know how many months to watch the cricket match, right? And after the match was over, the TV was still on, and I was like, there's so many ads after ads after ads. I was like, is that what we used to watch all the time? Because I haven't really watched a lot of TV in the last 10 years. I mean, I cut the cord several years ago and recently got it in the pandemic just to watch cricket matches.
But even that,
again.
I've actually watched it on streaming platforms now. So I'm with you on this.
Exactly. So the thing is, we've become, our bar for nonsense has sort of gone. It's so different from what it was 10 years ago, right? You would not think about an ad when we'll switch channels or today it's like, wait, why am I watching this ad? Like, why are there so many ads, right? Because, well, we're in an age where we are on OTT. It's a or what's called like subscription economy, right? Today we what we like to pay for it, and that's all that we want. We don't want anything else beyond what we chose it for. So that has made it interesting. And in a way, how I look at it is, with so many options today to consume content, our attention span has also been affected, right? Earlier, there was just one TV, and the family would gather together and watch certain shows, and there are certain shows that you would not want to watch with family, and those are the ones that you would watch by yourself, and that's about it, right? But today, there's so many screens that you have, so many options, so many OTT players. Sometimes it becomes so difficult to track, okay, someone spoke about this TV series, but I don't know which of the OTT platforms is it on, right? There's so many choices. Content has become, even more interesting. It's even more harder to get that attention today as a marketer or as a creator, I would say, right? What we've seen, is the kind of content that sticks well with people is, of course, there's humor that people enjoy, but being helpful. I mean, if you look at something like, in our world, people give a lot of importance to SEO and content that surfaces up and organic traffic and whatnot. I think content that is designed with, with that in mind, that you're helping someone solve a problem, that kind of content is what works best in the long run, right? Of course, there'll be topical stories and content that will come and go, and they'll have a shelf life. But in fact, for us as a company, some of the best performing content has been content that was written to help people do something or achieve something. And the other side, like I said, is of course humor and all of that also works. So more from the kind of content we create and we deal with, there's less scope of humor. I mean, even if I say there's scope, not something we have dabbled with so far yet. But helpful content definitely works well for us. And I think with this subscription economy, written content, there's this Substack, the newsletters, there's this Medium. I mean, the other day I was speaking with somebody and I was like, how many apps do we subscribe to today and we pay for, right? At some point we have lost track. And, like I have a New York Times subscription, I have a Medium subscription, and there are other blogs that I subscribe to. It's just not possible for me to consume everything, right? And then we try to once in a while cleanse that, right? Okay, these are the subscriptions I have not used at all in the last 5 months. It's time to unsubscribe, right? Because there's a lot of clutter, there's a lot of noise, right? So it's becoming very, very challenging for content creators as well to retain that attention and get that attention and so yeah, that's how I think about it.
If you look back at from the time you started off your career now, and you had to pick, let's say, a few things that you kind of learned along the way, which everybody should kind of keep in mind at whichever stage in their career they're at, and what would those things be?
So I hadn't worked for a software company before when I joined Zoho. I mean, I was a customer, interestingly. I was a Zoho customer previously. And this was, this is technically my first job because prior to this, I had my own little thing. And I remember when I joined, I wasn't very sure how would it look to do a job. Right? Because so far I was used to running my own agency and fairly small 15 people team at max, and we had it felt like to an extent that we never came out of college till the time I joined Zoho, even though it had been 4 years, because completely different vibe. And so I was a little, I won't say hesitant, but I used to wonder how this would be. How is a job? How does a job feel like, right? Within a year, it just felt that it's an extension of what I was doing earlier, right? So again, grateful for the culture, for the overall environment, all of that. So a lot of things I learned here was, again, I started to work with colleagues who are in different regions of the country and in different countries. That kind of exposure I never had. I always dealt with people from in and around where I used to live, mostly speaking. So I learned to work with people from different regions and backgrounds, and which was initially a bit challenging because sometimes something as trivial as language could be a barrier, right? If you don't understand the same language or the local language, right, it might feel overwhelming. What's going on? You're not able to keep a tab on it. But over time, I think you build that relationship, that trust, right? And and in that process, sometimes you rub someone the wrong way as well. I mean, we're all human beings. And sometimes you may come across as someone you don't intend to, but you may end up making someone feel different about you. I think all that was a good learning experience. And it was, I think, a lot harder because I was remote, right? A lot of these things seem a lot easier when you are in the same shared space, right? So it was like remote work I learned a lot working remotely, I would say. No matter I was at home or at an airport or in some other country or some other city, building that relationship, being on communication tools and via email and chat and phone calls, I think that was a very different experience. And today I feel good that I had that exposure and that situation to learn that in this year, I didn't really feel any communication challenges because that's how I've always worked, right? Where people are struggling today to, too many video calls or too many audio calls and this sudden burst of, communication channels that have come that I have to deal with. Earlier, that was not the case. I could just walk to someone's desk and have a chat with them. Well, I could never do that anyway, right? So I think that was a good learning. Apart from that, I think seeing the SaaS ecosystem evolve in the last 8-10 years, I would say, the way it has, from a handful of product companies in India to now so many startups that we talk about, media talks about, we connect with them on Twitter and LinkedIn. It's just been so much fun being part of this journey and seeing it from a single point. I mean, I have no idea how this lens would have been if I would have jumped between 3 companies by now, which is very common if I look at my colleagues, my peer group, my friends, all of that. I happen to just be here and look at the world change and be part of this small change in a very different way. So it's very fascinating. And I feel very fortunate to have been in this spot and see the company grow, the industry evolve. And I think it's the next 5-10 years going to be very, very interesting for India in terms of the SaaS ecosystem, the way it is playing out.
As we come towards the end of every episode, I have this bunch of questions I ask all my guests, right? It's more, and these have always stayed the same, but I always find that I get interesting responses to all of them. So what is that one thing that you spend a lot of time doing, consuming? It takes a certain amount of your day, which you enjoy kind of setting aside for it. It could be watching something, could be doing something. Which most people who know you, let's say professionally, might be surprised to know that that's what you spend a lot of time doing. What would that one thing be?
If you ask me for this year, I've spent a lot of time learning about coffee, experimenting with coffee, brewing my coffee at home. And oh, really? Okay, we should. Okay, we have to take this offline. But yeah, this year I've spent a lot of time playing, experimenting, trying. In fact, I joined there's a group that discusses it very actively. So it was fun. That's one thing. Are you
a pour-over person or a mocha pot person?
I'm a pour-over person. I am a pour-over person. Yeah, I was just looking at my V60 pack. This is the 3rd pack that I'm almost about to finish. And no, I have finished the 3rd one. So we're talking about 300 plus pour-overs in just last few months, whatever. No? So yeah, there's a lot of learning fun. I think now a lot of people know that. So I don't know if this answer qualifies for the last bit that you said that most people don't know. I mean, still a lot of people don't know about that, but people have now started to figure out that I'm getting into coffee.
Yeah, it's so interesting that so many of us have gotten back to old school brewing methods. Like literally, we all had coffee machines at some point, but we've enjoyed this process. Like for me, it was, now I actually go through 2 processes. I do a mocha pot in the morning and I do a pour over later in the day. And it's just become one of those things you do. I tell people it's just a time to kind of, you take moments to kind of switch off and just do something and take you away from what you're doing.
It is therapeutic. It is therapeutic, right? And I think the fun is in the process and what you learn from it and how you make mistakes and how you correct them and how you run experiments, right? So the fun is, and the manual brewing methods teach you that, right? I mean, suddenly you feel that you're creating something, that joy of creating, even if it's just a cup of coffee, which you can just, press a button and get it, or just pour some instant coffee or whatever, right? It's so different and it's so fulfilling. I did not know I would feel that way about it. But yeah, I try to stick to 2 cups a day. One, the morning being a pour over, and then I would do an espresso sometimes or a AeroPress in the evening. But I try to limit it to 2 cups of coffee.
We all try to make that 2. It eventually becomes 3 most days.
Yeah, it does.
What can you put together in an instant? I think the one question led to the other and might end up being the same thing, but It's a very open-ended question. What can you put together in an instant?
Well, if you ask this question to me before I joined Zoho, even before you would complete the question, I would say presentation, because that's what we were doing as an agency, right? I mean, every day we're trying to wrap up a presentation for some pitch or meeting or whatever. But now if you talk about it, something that I can put together in an instant is maybe a strong positioning narrative for a brand or for a product. And that's something I really enjoy, and I try to help. I'm often chatting with people who are starting up or who are trying to build something of their own, and people would, because I'm available and easily accessible on Twitter all the time, so I would get direct messages from like, hey, we're going to launch this on Product Hunt the next week. Would you like to take a look at it? And that's kind of thing I really enjoy doing, looking at someone's product or the idea and see how they're coming up with the messaging for it. That's just fun. I mean, I'm not saying I'm the best at it, but I enjoy the process of doing it, and I've learned a lot doing that. Yeah, so I can do that anytime.
Anything you've read, watched, or listened to in recent times that you recommend?
So I'm pretty bad at series, TV series or whatever. My favorite list or whatever they call it, the bookmark, is sort of bursting through the seams, because like I would talk to people and they say, you know what, you should watch this.
That's the worst thing to do. You have too many of those. Yeah.
I would never come back to it. Right. But I in this pandemic, in this lockdown, the most recent one was the 1992 scam that I watched. I liked it. I think it was a bit more stretched than I think it should have been, but it was gripping nevertheless. I enjoyed it. Prior to that, I watched Money Heist that I really enjoyed. Okay, and these days I'm watching Schitt's Creek, which is the reason I like it is these are 20-minute
breathers,
bites, right? Yes. So end of the day, and there's nothing like there's no thrill or there's no suspense towards the end of it that will keep you hooked on to watch the next and the next and the next episode. So I can just end my day and watch a 20-minute episode and then be done with it, right? So it's a nice way to decompress end of the day.
And my last question is, why do you think advertising will not die? Or marketing either?
Advertising will not die. No, advertising, I would put that as a subset of marketing, but no, I think advertising isn't going to die, because think about it. Like I said, all this, like we're talking about attention span and devices and connectivity and all of that. And again, we spoke about content towards the end, right? I mean, advertising is a form of content, right? Is content going to die? No. I think advertising has become more native, more hybrid, more contextual as part of our lives. And today, while a TV ad sounds so weird to us, that because we don't relate with it, there's no context sometimes, and the same ad is shown to everybody and all of that. But if you're looking through your feed and if the ad is placed intelligently enough, you don't mind it sometimes. I have discovered so many D2C brands in this pandemic purely because of ads.
Same here.
Right? While some of them would have been not so nice, and I felt that I could give them some feedback, but a lot of it was like, wow, somebody is doing this somewhere in India and I didn't know about it. So let's look what it is, right? So that's what things like these make me feel that's not going to die. What's going to happen is advertisers will get smarter. The content will be more contextual, more relevant, and more helpful. And as long as these things are met, I think once in a while I'm not against ads from a consumer perspective. If ads are smart and they're helping me in some way, I'm open to the idea of it. But overdose of ads just because, everybody has to keep their thing running. So I understand that, publishers and advertisers have a role to play. But some of the ads are so good that, you want to see them again, right? And I think as marketers, we envy people who've created ads that people go back and want to watch it, right? So yeah, I think advertising isn't going to die, and neither is marketing. It's just like how we deal with it, the kind of content we create, and how much we understand people and their behavior and what they care about. I think that has evolved over the years, and that will continue to, and we will continue to learn from that.
Thanks so much for doing this. This has been awesome. I think I have a bunch of points from this, but in general, I feel that I got what I wanted and a lot more out of this. And I know for a fact everyone listening in will get that as well. Thanks so much for taking the time, Praval.
Thank you so much, Varun. It was so much fun wrapping up the year with this conversation, and look forward to connecting with you again.
Likewise.
Okay.
Thanks for coming on Advertising is Dead.
Bye, Varun.
I hope you enjoyed that show. If you aren't following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I'd like to thank the sponsors on the network this week, Storytel and The Whole Truth Foods. Thank you for supporting us. So a great bunch of episodes this week. First, let me tell you about The Note with Maruk Inayat. It was featuring Asaduddin Owaisi. She spoke to the AIMIM leader to understand what the Indian Muslim voter wants and how his party is any different from the BJP. On Advertising is Dead, Varun spoke with Malika Sadani. Malika is the founder and CEO of the Moms Company. They discussed the science of motherhood. On Naan Curry with Sadaf and Archit, Dhananjay Chuck of the Edges and Sledges podcast showed up, so we did another crossover, this time with food and cricket. On Agla Station Adulthood, Ritasha and Ayushi talked to Gaurang Sangvi, head of digital business at DSP Mutual Fund. The episode has some logical and realistic advice, especially for millennials, on how to invest their money. Shunya One is back this week with Sheila Ditya and myself. We spoke to Anirudh Singla of Pepper Content this week. Really interesting conversation. Anirudh gave us some real deep insights into content creation and how they're thinking about different ways of creating it. Do check them out. Really fun show, really fun conversation. And with that, we hope to see you again next week.
Hey, I'm Zarina, your peak performance coach, leadership coach, and life coach. And I'm here to unleash that power within you with your weekly dose of mantras and empowerment. Tune in to Monday Mantras every Monday for your quick fix, and the Empowering Series with Zarina Poonawalla every Thursday for riveting real-life stories. You can catch us on the IVM Podcast website, app, or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Want to learn something new and have a few minutes to spare? Well, then go for the Traveling Professor's Diary, where I, Siddharth Deshmukh, the Traveling Professor, will help you glean from all the insights that I've gained from wherever I've traveled, learned, taught, and repeated. Join me every Tuesday and Thursday on the IVM Podcast website, app, or wherever you get your podcasts from.